refer to the FBI data and say, crime is down. Don't believe your lying eyes. But here's the deal. The data for FBI changed the way they gather data. And now you have 40% of states, cities, and localities that don't even report. Then you have another 20% that only report part of it. So your data is bad. And when I talk about not reporting, we're talking places like New York City doesn't report. California doesn't report. So how can you even begin to say you've got accurate data? You don't. So let's go ahead and let's review a little bit of the Minnesota fund that we're talking about largely today.
Jaleel Stallings, charged with attempted murder, prosecutors say he shot at a SWAT team during the riots in May. Someone paid $75 grand cash to get him out of jail. All three would probably still be sitting in jail if it wasn't for the Minnesota Freedom Fund, the group that paid their bail, no questions asked.
Last time I was down there, they said, you know, we hate it when you bail out these sex offenders, was exactly what they said. And
Greg Lewin is the group's executive director, who says it's not about the crime, it's about the system.
I often don't even look at a charge specifics when I bail someone out. I'll see it after I pay the bail because it's not the point. It's just that it is not the point. The point is the system that we're fighting.
And now the Freedom Fund has a whole lot more money for that fight. Prior tax returns show in a good year they pull in about $100,000 in donations. But after the police killing of George Floyd and supportive tweets from Hollywood celebrities, they've now received more than $35 million in contributions.
As riots shook cities across the United States in 2020, then Senator Kamala Harris authored a little-known blog post urging the public to help demonstrators by donating to a bail fund. Harris is still fundraising on behalf of the controversial charity, according to Act Blue. Harris wrote in the blog post, quote, "I stand with those protesting George Floyd's murder." She then asked people to make a contribution to the Minnesota Freedom Fund. Harris, in June 2020, famously posted a tweet asking people to chip into the Freedom Fund. Since then, the bail fund has freed George Howard, who pleaded guilty to second-degree murder for shooting and killing a man in 2020 in Minneapolis. Sean Tillman of St. Paul, who was sentenced to life in prison this year for first- and second-degree murder. Others who were freed in connection to the bail fund include Darnica Floyd, who was sentenced to prison in 2021 for stabbing a man to death, and a slew of serial domestic abusers. The fund also paid $350,000 to release a twice-convicted rapist, Christopher Boswell.
As a senator, as a politician, someone who has to respond to the constituents, what do these protests mean to the ability to affect change legislatively? Because
the only way we're going to truly achieve change is when there are people in the system who are willing or pushing to do it, and when there are those folks who are outside of the system demanding it. I am very clear that some of the success that we've been able to achieve around criminal justice reform would not have happened in recent years were it not for Black Lives Matter. And the intensity and the brilliance of that movement that forced at least that there would be some counterforce to the status quo, which is so reluctant for change, if not hostile to change. That's what these movements do. That where these systems are so invested and ingrained in what they call tradition, but is status quo, often which can be wrong-headed, these movements provide a counterforce to get us to where we need to be.
So when the current vice president solicited funds for that fund, she talked about freeing protesters. But you heard the director say, we don't even care what the charges are. We don't care what the charges are. It had nothing to do with protests. That might be fraud, you'll bet.